They said, "We're too busy, Dad," but that Thanksgiving in 2018, when the Great Lakes flood swallowed half of Milwaukee's shoreline and turned our backyard into a muddy river, I learned that family isn't measured by blood, but by who shows up when the water's rising. I'm Mike Harper, and back then, I was knee-deep in the chaos of our old Craftsman house on the edge of town, the kind of place Emma and I had poured our lives into over 30 years of marriage. The rain had been relentless for weeks, pounding the roof like an accusation, and by Thanksgiving morning, the lake had surged, flooding the streets and creeping up to our foundation. Sirens wailed through the night as neighbors evacuated, but I stayed, stubborn as ever, determined to honor Emma's traditions one more time. I set out her pecan pie, her handwritten recipe tucked in my wallet, calling for a flaky crust made with lard and a pinch of sea salt, the filling rich with toasted nuts and just enough bourbon to warm the soul. Beside it went the dry-brined turkey I'd roasted slow over hickory chips in the backyard smoker, the smoke curling up defiantly against the gray sky, filling the air with that earthy scent she used to say smelled like forgiveness after a long argument. The kids, Nathan, the eldest at 28, always chasing the next big idea in tech, Kelly, 26, with her influencer dreams and endless filters, and Josh, 24, the quiet one who'd turned his photography hobby into a side gig, had all bowed out weeks earlier. They'd flown off to Austin for some 3-day productivity summit, a fancy retreat they'd hyped on group texts as their ticket to redefining success. I imagined them there now, lounging by a pool or whatever passed for luxury in Texas, posting reels of smoky brisket plates and craft beers foaming in mason jars. Their captions scrolled across my phone screen as I basted the bird one last time, the blue light cutting through the dim kitchen like a bad omen, detoxing from toxic traditions. One read, with an emoji of a broken chain. Another from Kelly, leveling up without the baggage, grateful for the grind. Nathan's was a video of him toasting with strangers, hashtagging #FamilyFree. Josh just liked their posts, silent as always. I paused, wiping my hands on a dish towel embroidered with turkeys, Emma's doing, from a craft fair years back, and felt the house settle around me, heavier than the floodwaters outside. The kids hadn't called to check on the storm, hadn't asked if the power was still on or if the basement was holding. Emma would have laughed at their absence, her eyes crinkling as she stirred the gravy, saying something wry about how they'd inherited my drive but none of her patience. But she wasn't there to laugh anymore, and the silence echoed louder than the distant rumble of rescue boats on the lake. I carved the turkey anyway, the knife slipping through the tender meat, and plated a solitary meal at the table we'd refinished together, wondering if this was the year the traditions finally drowned. That solitary meal sat half-eaten on my plate, the turkey cooling under the flicker of a single candle I'd lit against the power outages that plagued the neighborhood. The floodwaters lapped at the back door like an uninvited guest, and I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping louder than it should in the empty room. Emma's absence wasn't new. It had been a year since she left us, but on holidays like this, it hit like a fresh wave, pulling me under. I cleared the dishes methodically, stacking them in the sink where the faucet dripped in rhythm with the rain outside. As I scrubbed the pecan pie tin, my mind wandered back, not to the flood, but to the months before, when the real storm had started brewing inside our home. It began with a routine checkup, the kind you schedule and forget about until the call comes. Emma, at 62, had been the rock of our family, teaching history at the local high school, organizing block parties, and always the one to mend fences with the kids when their ambitions pulled them away. That spring, the doctor found a shadow on her lung scan, a word like carcinoma, that turned our kitchen into a war room. We drove to Chicago the next week for confirmation. The highway blurring past as she held my hand, her grip steady but her voice quieter than usual. "Mike, whatever it is, we've got this," she'd said, squeezing my fingers. But immunotherapy wasn't a battle you won with grit alone. It was a grind, a schedule of infusions every 3 weeks at Northwestern Memorial, 2 hours from Milwaukee. For the first 6 months, I rearranged my life around those trips. I'd wake at dawn, pack the cooler with her favorite herbal teas and turkey sandwiches on rye, no mayo, just mustard, and we'd hit the road by 7, the radio tuned to oldies to keep the mood light. Emma loved Sinatra on those drives, crooning along to My Way as Lake Michigan gleamed on our left. By the time we reached the city, the skyline loomed like a promise of answers, but the hospital corridors were a maze of beeps and hushed voices. I'd park in the garage, help her into the wheelchair when her legs grew heavy, and we'd navigate to the oncology wing, where the air smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. The treatments themselves were brutal. She'd settle into the recliner, for line snaking into her arm, the drip delivering what the doctors called targeted therapy, drugs designed to rally her immune system against the cancer cells. I'd pull out the fold-out chair beside her bed in the recovery area, the one with the thin mattress that creaked under my weight. Sleep came in fits, interrupted by nurses checking vitals or Emma stirring from the nausea meds. To pass the time, we'd talk about everything and nothing, the kids' latest ventures, the garden she'd planted that spring with heirloom tomatoes now wilting back home, or plans for a trip to the Smokies once she was better. "We'll hike that trail by the river," she'd say, her eyes bright despite the fatigue. I'd nod, brewing vending machine coffee, black, scalding hot, and joke that it was our personal sommelier, pairing notes of burnt rubber with the hospital's fluorescent glow. "Better than that Napa vintage we splurged on in '05, I'd quip, and she'd chuckle, weak but genuine, her hand finding mine across the rail. The kids knew about the diagnosis from the start. Nathan called from his Silicon Valley startup, promising to fly in as soon as the funding round wraps. Kelly, building her lifestyle blog from a co-working space in Denver, sent care packages of essential oils and affirmation cards. Josh, freelancing as a photographer in Portland, texted daily check-ins with sunset pics from the coast. They meant well, I told myself, their lives pulling them in a dozen directions. But as the months dragged on, the visits trickled in like rain after a drought, sporadic and not enough to quench the thirst. Nathan made it once, in the early summer, arriving with a laptop bag stuffed with productivity apps he swore would streamline Dad's caregiving routine. He stayed for the afternoon infusion, snapping a selfie with Emma in her gown, her smile forced but game. "We're fighting this together," he captioned the TikTok later, the video showing him holding her hand dramatically while the four beeped in the background. Likes poured in from his followers, hundreds of thumbs up and comments about resilience. He left that evening, citing a pitch meeting in San Francisco, but not before handing me a spreadsheet of meal prep services I could outsource to save time. Kelly came twice, both times coordinated around her content calendar. The first visit, she brought a ring light and filmed a Real Talk segment for her channel, Emma sharing lessons from the fight, Kelly nodding empathetically, her makeup flawless even in the dim room. "Mom's warrior spirit is inspiring us all," the post read, with hashtags like #CancerJourney and #FamilyStrong. Emma appreciated the distraction, but afterward, as Kelly scrolled through analytics on her phone, I saw the exhaustion in my wife's eyes. The second trip was shorter, a quick lunch in the hospital cafeteria, where Kelly live-streamed bites of salad while quizzing Emma on mindset shifts. She hugged us goodbye in the lobby, promising more visits, but her flight back to a brand collab took priority. Josh was the most consistent in messages. But visits? Only once, in the fall, when the leaves turned the drive scenic. He showed up with his camera, capturing candid moments for what he called a personal project, a photo essay on resilience. We posed by the window overlooking the Chicago River, Emma's hand on mine, the autumn light softening the edges. He posted a few shots on Instagram, black and white filters turning pain into art, captions poetic about holding on through the storm. It touched Emma, seeing her struggle framed that way, but when he left, it was with a vague "I'll be back soon," swallowed by a gallery deadline in Seattle. 18 months in, the drives became my routine, the fold out my second bed. I'd catnap in the car on the way back if Emma dozed, or read the paper aloud to her, skipping the bad news, focusing on local heroes or sports scores. The bills piled up, gas, tolls, copays that insurance nibbled at but never fully covered. I dipped into savings, the ones we'd earmarked for the kids' futures or our retirement cabin. The house in Milwaukee echoed when we were gone, the mail stacking on the counter, the fridge humming alone. But the kids' visits faded to video calls, quick faces on screens, their backgrounds trendy lofts or coffee shops, voices laced with apologies about crazy schedules. Emma noticed, of course. In quieter moments, post-treatment when the drugs made her reflective, she'd whisper, "They're building their worlds, Mike. We did our job." But I saw the hurt in her averted gaze, the way she'd scroll through their social feeds, liking posts that felt miles from our reality. The TikToks and Reels kept coming, updates on their journeys, occasional shout-outs to Mom's battle, but they were performances, not presence. When the final scan showed progression, and the doctors shifted to palliative care, the visits stopped altogether. Nathan sent a Venmo for gas money. Kelly mailed a crystal for healing vibes. Josh's texts grew shorter, emojis standing in for words. Emma passed in the early hours of a Tuesday, the room bathed in the soft glow of monitors. I held her hand till the end, the vending machine coffee cold in my cup. The kids arrived for the funeral, suits pressed and condolences scripted, but the house afterward, that's when the echoing started. Bills arrived like clockwork, the immunotherapy copays totaling thousands, funeral costs, the mortgage she'd insisted we keep low. I paid them alone, the checkbook balanced on the kitchen table where family dinners used to be. The kids called sporadically, offering thoughts and prayers via text, but life pulled them back. Summits, collabs, gigs. The house grew louder in its silence, every creak a reminder of 4 drips and unspoken promises, the flood of 2018 just another layer on the grief that had already soaked through. As the floodwaters finally receded in late November of 2018, leaving behind silt-streaked lawns and a community piecing itself back together, I found myself sifting through the wreckage not just of our yard, but of the life Emma and I had built. The basement pump hummed day and night, sucking out the last of the muck, while I boxed up her clothes, blouses folded neatly, the scarf she wore to chemo draped over a hanger like a ghost. The kids sent sympathy cards post-flood, digital ones with animated rainbows, but no one offered to help with the cleanup. Nathan wired $100 for supplies, Kelly posted a story about holding space for loss, and Josh emailed a photo of a flooded Portland street, captioning it, "Solidarity." It was enough to make me wonder if they'd ever truly been part of this house, or if I'd been raising echoes all along. But Emma had seen it coming, that drift. Even as the cancer wore her down, her mind stayed sharp, the history teacher in her always plotting timelines and contingencies. It started in the summer of 2017, midway through her treatments, when the side effects left her bedridden for days. We'd just come home from Chicago, her arm bandaged from the port insertion, and she called me to the living room where sunlight slanted through the blinds like bars on a cell. "Mike, sit," she said, her voice thin but commanding, patting the couch beside her. I did, expecting talk of pain meds or the next scan, but she pulled out a yellow legal pad, scribbled notes in her precise handwriting. "We need to talk about after," she said, not if, but after, as if planning a vacation itinerary. She'd been thinking about the kids for months, watching their calls grow shorter, their visits turn into photo ops. "There are blood, but blood doesn't pay the mortgage or hold your hand at 3 a.m., she told me one night, the hospital hum fading as we drove back under a harvest moon. Emma wasn't one for bitterness, she believed in second chances, in teaching through example. But she also knew the value of what we'd scraped together over decades, my steady job as a mechanic at the Ford plant, her teacher's pension, the life insurance policy I'd maxed out years ago, and that lakefront lot up north we'd bought on a whim in the 90s, a wooded parcel by the water where we dreamed of building a cabin. It wasn't a fortune, but it was ours, hard-earned and meant to secure the family she'd fought so hard to keep whole. The next week, she insisted on seeing Liam Sutton, our family attorney since the kids were toddlers. Liam was a no-nonsense type, mid-50s with a salt and pepper beard and an office downtown stacked with law books that smelled of old paper and resolve. We'd used him for the house closing, wills after Nathan's birth, but this was different. Emma wheeled in, me pushing, her chin up, and laid it out over coffee in his conference room, a flexible family trust, not the rigid kind that locked everything away, but one that rewarded presence over pretense. "I want it to reflect who shows up," she said, her eyes meeting Liam's without flinching. He nodded, jotting notes, and asked about specifics. No outright disinheritance, that wasn't her style, but incentives tied to actions. The core was the demonstrated participation clause. To access their shares, the kids would need to prove involvement in the family, not just lip service. It could mean regular visits, help with bills, or time spent caregiving, documented lightly, through logs or witnesses, to avoid bureaucracy. Liam drafted it carefully, quarterly reviews by a neutral trustee, perhaps a family friend, assessing contributions like hours logged or financial support. Emma added her touch, a compassion threshold, a qualitative measure that went beyond spreadsheets. It evaluated heart, not just hours. Had they listened without agenda? Comforted without cameras? Actions that built bridges, not just captured likes. "Speeches are cheap, Liam," she said. "We measure verbs, not nouns." Then came the no contest trigger, the steel spine of the document. Challenge the trust in court, contest distributions, sue for more, and you'd forfeit everything. It was ironclad, drawn from precedents Liam pulled up on his computer, citing cases where greedy heirs lost it all over petty disputes. Emma leaned forward, her hands clasped. "I don't want them fighting over me like I'm a prize. This forces them to choose, family or fallout." I sat there, quiet, my throat tight. Part of me wanted to protest. The kids were ambitious, not monsters, but Emma's gaze silenced me. She'd watched them prioritize feeds over funerals, trends over treatments. This was her way of calling them back, a final lesson in what mattered. Liam helped refine it over weeks, meetings squeezed between her infusions. We'd drive to his office after Chicago stops, Emma dictating changes from the passenger seat, her voice gaining strength with purpose. "Add a sunset clause," she'd say, "so if they step up, the trust evolves, no grudges forever." He incorporated flexibility, early distributions for education or emergencies, but only if participation was met. The lakefront lot? Held in escrow, its value a wild card, sentimental to us, but potentially lucrative if developed. Insurance proceeds went into the pool, earmarked for stability. And the house? To stay in the trust until I decided, an anchor for whatever came next. As her health declined, the meetings shifted to our kitchen table, Liam bringing files in a briefcase, Emma in her robe, me brewing that vending machine-style coffee at home. She signed the final version in October 2017. Her signature steady despite the tremor in her hands. "For the ones who stay," she whispered, folding the papers. Liam shook her hand, his eyes misty. "This is wise, Emma. Protects the legacy without breaking hearts." But we both knew it might. The kids weren't looped in yet. Emma wanted to tell them herself, over a family dinner that never happened. Her strength ebbed, the cancer spreading to her bones, and by winter, conversations turned to pain management, not estates. When she passed, the trust activated automatically, Liam handling the filings with quiet efficiency. He called me the day after the funeral, as shovels hit dirt in the cemetery. "It's in place, Mike. The kids will get notice soon." I nodded into the phone, staring at the empty chair across from me. The letters went out certified mail, summaries of the terms, invitations to meet and discuss. Nathan responded first, an email thread about clarifying ambiguities. Kelly wanted a video call to understand Mom's intentions. Josh texted, "This feels off, can we talk?" They came home for a reading in Liam's office, faces drawn, excuses ready. But Emma's words echoed in the clauses, actions over alibis. In the months that followed, as I navigated grief alone, the trust became my quiet ally. Neighbors like Mrs. Reeves from Bayou Street dropped by with meals, no fanfare. The veterans from Station 14, guys I'd known since my service days, built that ramp without asking, tools clanging in the driveway. They weren't bound by paper, but they showed up. The kids? Their participation was spotty, a weekend here, a check there, always with an angle. Nathan proposed monetizing the trust for a family app. Kelly filmed trust transparency content. Josh offered to document it all in photos. Liam advised patience, the compassion threshold watching like Emma's eyes. By the next Thanksgiving, as the flood scars faded, I realized the trust wasn't punishment, it was a mirror. It reflected who we'd become without her, me, holding the line, them, chasing shadows. And as the holidays loomed again, with their summit invites ignored, I started planning. Not revenge, but redemption, Emma's way, with a hook they couldn't scroll past. The winter after Emma's passing dragged on like a Milwaukee gray, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes every chore feel like wading through slush. Christmas came and went without the kids. Nathan sent a drone for the grandkids we didn't have yet, Kelly a subscription to some meditation app, Josh a calendar of his photos. I strung lights on the porch alone, the bulbs twinkling against the snow like distant stars, and attended the neighborhood potluck where folks raised toasts to Emma's memory. But the house stayed too quiet, the trust letters lingering unanswered in my mind. Liam had warned me, give them time, but don't chase. Instead, it was the unexpected visitors who filled the gaps, the ones who showed up not for inheritance or Instagram, but because that's what neighbors do when the world's gone sideways. It started small, in those first raw weeks after the funeral. Mrs. Reeves from Bayou Street, widowed herself, with a voice like warm cornbread and hands calloused from years tending her victory garden, knocked one afternoon as I stared at a stack of sympathy cards, unsure where to file them. She was in her late 70s, silver hair pinned back, carrying a thermos in each hand. "Mike, I heard about Emma from the paper," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invite, her boots leaving wet prints on the mat. "Brought chicken soup, real stock, from the henhouse, with carrots and noodles like my mama made." I mumbled thanks, but she waved it off, setting the thermoses on the counter and pulling out a stool like she'd been there 100 times. Over the next hour, she didn't pry about the illness or the kids. Instead, she talked about her own losses, her husband to the mill accident in '89, her sister to the flu, and how soup fixed nothing but warmed the hollow spots. She left with a promise to return, and she did, weekly at first, then bi-weekly, thermoses swapped for casseroles or pies, always with a story that made the kitchen feel less like a tomb. Mrs. Reeves became my unofficial anchor, the one who noticed when the trash piled up or the lawn grew ragged. She'd arrive with her old radio, tuned to big band tunes Emma loved, and we'd sit at the table, sipping tea while she peeled potatoes for a stew. "Actions speak, Mike," she'd say, echoing Emma without knowing it. "Words are wind." She never asked about the trust, but once, when a bill collector called loud enough for her to hear, she took the phone gently from my hand. "He's grieving, sir. Send it later." Her presence wasn't dramatic, no viral posts or grand gestures, just steady, like the tick of the clock in the hall. By spring, when the floods threatened again, she organized the block to sandbag my place, her voice cutting through the chatter, "Emma's man needs this house standing." It was the first time in months I felt the walls hold more than memories. Then there were the veterans from Station 14, a crew I'd known loosely since my Army days in the '70s. I'd fixed engines for some at the plant, shared beers at VFW meetings, but we weren't close, until Emma's ramp. It happened in May, as her final spring bloomed outside the windows. The stairs had become a hazard after the treatments left her unsteady, but installing a ramp meant permits and costs I couldn't swing alone. I mentioned it offhand at the station during a coffee run, griping about estimates running high. Next Saturday, they showed Hank, the burly ex-Marine with tattoos fading like old flags, Tom, the quiet Vietnam vet who fixed clocks for a living, and a half-dozen others, trucks loaded with lumber and tools. "No charge, Harper," Hank grunted, hammering the first post into the porch. "Emma taught our kids history, least we can do is keep her home accessible." They worked through the weekend, buzz buzzing and laughter cutting the air, sharing stories over sandwiches I threw together, ham on wheat, nothing fancy. Tom talked about his wife's passing to Alzheimer's, how he'd built her a garden bench to watch birds from bed. Hank joked about boot camp mishaps, but his eyes softened when he nailed the railing, testing it twice for safety. By Sunday evening, the ramp stretched smooth from door to yard, wide enough for a wheelchair, stained the color of aged oak to match the house. They didn't stay for thanks, just packed up, Hank clapping my shoulder, for the battles you fight quiet. Word spread in the vet circle. After that, check-ins became routine. Tom dropped by with a repaired watch of Emma's, hands steady as ever. Hank mowed the lawn when my back acted up. They weren't family by blood, but in those hours of sweat and shared silences, they became the brothers I'd lost touch with over decades. As summer heated up, the support web widened in ways I never expected. The house, once echoing, started humming with unannounced visits, folks from Emma's school, her book club, even the librarian who'd recommended her favorite mysteries. But Joanna stood out, Emma's high school friend from the 70s, a free spirit who'd moved to Madison after college but kept in touch through letters and the occasional lunch. They bonded over Nina Simone records back in the day, spinning vinyls at sock hops and dreaming big. Joanna was a painter now, her hands stained with oils, living in a cottage cluttered with canvases. I hadn't seen her since the funeral, where she'd hugged me fierce and whispered, "Emma was my North Star." She arrived on a Thursday in August, unannounced as a summer storm, her old Volvo rattling up the drive with a turntable in the back seat and a box of records under her arm. "Mike, this house needs music," she declared, breezing in with a scarf fluttering like a flag. No pity in her eyes, just purpose. She set up in the living room, dusting off the old console Emma and I had bought in the 80s, the one gathering dust since her hands grew too weak to lift the needle. Joanna plugged in the turntable, her fingers deft, and dropped the arm on Nina Simone's "I Put a Spell on You." The crackle filled the room, then that voice, raw, soulful, pouring out like it had waited years. We sat on the couch, feet up, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. Joanna didn't talk death. She shared stories of Emma from their youth, sneaking into jazz clubs, debating civil rights over diner coffee, Emma's laugh cutting through the smoke. She saw people, Mike. Really saw them. One track led to another, Feeling Good, My Baby Just Cares for Me, the house transforming under the notes. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like a museum of losses, the furniture breathed, the walls echoed with rhythm instead of regret. Joanna stayed till dusk, teaching me to cue the vinyl without skips, promising more visits. Music's Emma's way of saying keep going. Thanksgiving that year, post-flood, scars still fresh, crystallized it all. The neighborhood rallied without fanfare, Mrs. Reeves with her thermoses of soup, steaming against the chill, the vets hauling in a generator when power flickered, Joanna arriving early with the turntable, Nina Simone spinning, Ain't Got No, I Got Life, as we carved the bird. No kids in sight, their summit reels lighting up my feed from Austin, barbecue feasts, motivational talks, captions about breaking cycles. But around my table, it was real, laughter over burnt edges on the pie, toasts to Emma's recipes, the house alive with voices that had shown up when sirens wailed and waters rose. They weren't my blood, but they were family, the kind Emma's trust would honor, actions etching deeper than any clause. As the meal wound down, plates cleared and coffee poured, I felt a shift. The compassion threshold wasn't just for the kids, it measured us all. And with the holidays behind, I turned my thoughts to the plan brewing, Emma's legacy, not in dollars, but in the quiet revolutions that rebuild what floods take. As the last notes of Nina Simone faded into the crackle of the vinyl, and the dishes clinked in the sink under Mrs. Reeves's efficient hands, Thanksgiving evening settled over the house like a soft blanket, the flood's aftermath a distant memory outside the frost-laced windows. The table bore the remnants of our feast, crusts of pie, turkey bones picked clean, a half-empty pitcher of gravy, and for the first time since Emma's passing, the room held warmth without the chill of solitude. Hank from the vets cracked a joke about the ramp holding up better than the levees, drawing chuckles from Tom and Joanna, who refilled coffee mugs with a nod to Emma's blend. Mrs. Reeves wiped her hands on her apron, surveying us all with that knowing smile, the one that said we'd earned this moment. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under me, and felt a rare peace, the kind that sneaks up after storms have passed. But peace, in our family, had always been fragile, like the thin ice on the lake come early winter. As we pushed toward dessert, Emma's pecan pie sliced and waiting on the sideboard, the phone buzzed on the counter, insistent as a hornet. I glanced at the screen, a group video call from the kids, their faces pixelated in a grid, backgrounds a blur of Austin hotel lights and what looked like a conference lounge. Nathan's voice cut through first, polished as ever, the eldest taking point. "Dad, happy Thanksgiving. We wanted to connect, it's been too long." Kelly chimed in, her smile wide but filtered, hair perfect despite the late hour there. "Yeah, we've been reflecting a lot at this summit. Learning to let go of toxic patterns, you know?" Josh hung back, nodding, his camera angled to show a notebook scribbled with what I assumed were profound notes. I muted the kitchen chatter, waving them quiet, and answered, propping the phone against a napkin holder so they could see the table, the empty chairs where they might have sat. "Good to see you all," I said, keeping my tone even, though my gut twisted at the timing. They'd posted their reels earlier, smoky ribs, group toasts, captions about shedding outdated family scripts, but this call felt scripted too, eyes darting off screen like they were reading cues. Nathan leaned in, serious now. "Dad, we've talked it over. The summit's been eye-opening. All this talk about boundaries and growth, we realize we've been part of the problem. Ditching traditions for our own paths, that wasn't fair to you or Mom's memory." Kelly nodded vigorously. "Exactly. We're committed to change. No more ghosting holidays. Let's rebuild, starting now." The words hung there, polished and practiced, but something nagged, a flicker in Josh's expression, the way Nathan's hand hovered near his phone like he was about to share a link. Mrs. Reeves paused mid-wipe, her eyebrow arching slightly, while Joanna busied herself with the pie server, the clink of plates a subtle underscore. I murmured agreement, probing gently. "That's good to hear. What brought this on?" Kelly jumped in, her enthusiasm peaking. "The speakers, real game changers. One session on legacy and forgiveness. It hit home." Then Nathan forwarded something, a document popping up in the chat, an NDA, non-disclosure agreement from the event sponsor, a lifestyle brand pushing productivity retreats. "Check this out, Dad. The summit's not just talks, it's a collab opportunity. They loved our family story, resilience through loss. We're thinking of sharing more, with your blessing. Could turn Mom's journey into something inspirational, monetized right." The pieces clicked then, sharp as a latch. The Productivity Summit wasn't enlightenment, it was barter promo for their channels. Nathan's tech angle, Kelly's influencer grind, Josh's visuals, all funneled into content gold, our family's pain repackaged as motivational fodder. Selfies from chemo, TikToks of fighting together, now twisted into Summit side hustle. I felt the table's warmth cool, the pie untouched. "An NDA for family stories?" I asked, voice steady but edged. "They backpedaled, just protection," Nathan said, "empowering, not exploitative," Kelly added, but the call ended awkwardly, promises of follow-up dangling like bait. I set the phone down, the screen going dark, and the room exhaled. Hank grunted, "Sounds like they're selling what they didn't stick around for." Joanna slid plates of pie my way, her eyes kind but direct. Emma wouldn't want that circus. We ate in companionable quiet after, the nuts crunching under forks, the bourbon tang cutting the sweetness, but my mind raced ahead. The trust's clauses loomed, participation measured in deeds, not deals, and I wondered if this was the hook they'd bite, or if Emma's compassion threshold would weigh their words as hollow. The real twist came later that night, after the guests had gone, Mrs. Reeves with Tupperware of leftovers, the vets promising to check the ramp's bolts come thaw, Joanna leaving the turntable behind with a stack of records. I sat alone in the living room, the fire crackling low, nursing a glass of Emma's homemade cider when my phone lit up again. Not the kids this time, but Liam Sutton, his voice gravelly from a late dinner. "Mike, you alone? Got news on the lakefront lot? The parcel up north, the one Emma and I had snagged in the 90s for a song, a half-acre of pine and pebble shore where we'd picnicked with the kids as toddlers, dreaming of a cabin that never got built. We'd written it off as sentimental junk, taxes paid yearly out of nostalgia, its value stagnant amid the woods." Liam dove in, papers rustling on his end. "County surveyors mapped an artesian spring last month, pure, year-round flow, rare this far inland. Water quality's top-notch, they're eyeing it for a public park, conservation easement. Appraisers came back today, market value spiked to over $1.8 million, easy. With the insurance payout from Emma's policy, another $200,000, the trust's main pool hits $2 million clean." I gripped the armrest, the numbers blurring. That lot, with its wild blueberries and loon calls, had been our secret escape, a place where Nathan skipped stones, Kelly chased fireflies, Josh sketched the waterline. Now it was leverage, a windfall tied to the very clauses Emma had etched. "Why now?" I asked, mind spinning. Liam chuckled dryly. "Timing's everything. The floods highlighted water sources, drought fears pushing buys. But the trust holds it firm, proceeds route through the participation filter. Kids want in? They earn it." He outlined the basics: no immediate sale, but options, hold for appreciation or flip to the county, funds dispersed per the compassion threshold. Actions first, time with me, help around the house. Real involvement. Challenge it, and zero. I hung up, staring at the fire's embers, the $2 million not a fortune but a fulcrum, Emma's final play to tip the scales. Sleep evaded me that night, the house settling around the weight of possibilities. The kids' call replayed, their NDA a symptom of the distance Emma had foreseen. But the lot surge? That was fate's curveball, amplifying her trust into something transformative. By dawn, as frost etched the panes, I knew the plan taking shape, not division, but redirection. A Thanksgiving amendment, served with pie, to rewrite the legacy on terms of presence, not performance. The waters had risen once, now it was time to channel them right. Dawn broke cold and clear over Milwaukee that next Thanksgiving, the kind of November light that sharpens edges and strips away illusions, much like the plan I'd been turning over in my mind since Liam's call. The house stirred early, not with the chaos of past years, kids clamoring for seconds, Emma directing traffic from the kitchen, but with a purposeful quiet. I'd invited the usual suspects, Mrs. Reeves arriving at first light with her thermoses of mulled cider, the scent of cloves cutting the chill, Hank and Tom from the vets, hauling in folding chairs and a portable heater to ward off the draft, Joanna, turntable under arm, promising a playlist of Emma's favorites to set the tone. No fanfare, no posts, just folks who'd earned their seats through the unseen labors of the year. The kids? I'd sent a neutral invite weeks back, no pressure, but their summit had morphed into a legacy tour, reels hinting at homecoming without commitment. I didn't chase, Emma's trust would do the talking. By mid-morning, the table groaned under the spread, the dry brine turkey I'd smoked again, skin crackling golden, Emma's pecan pie, doubled this time for the crowd, mashed potatoes whipped with butter from the local creamery, green beans snapped fresh that morning, and cranberry relish tart enough to cut through any sentiment. The lakefront lot sale had closed quietly in the spring, county eager for that artesian spring, checks deposited into the trust's accounts, the $2 million pool swelling with Emma's insurance and a few wise investments Liam had suggested. It sat there, a reservoir waiting to be directed, the clauses holding it back until actions proved worthy. But today wasn't Judgment Day, it was Amendment Day, a chance to honor what Emma had built by reshaping it for those who'd shown the compassion she valued. Liam arrived last, briefcase in hand, his beard trimmed sharp against the wool coat. He shook hands all around, no stranger to this crew after advising on the ramp permits and Mrs. Reeves's property line squabble. "Mike, the documents are ready," he said low, pulling me aside to the study where Emma's history books lined the shelves like sentinels. We'd worked through the details over fall coffees, trust amendments flexible enough to adapt, but firm in their intent. The kids' superficial overtures post-summit, sporadic calls, a joint Venmo for holiday help, hadn't met the threshold. Their NDA pitch lingered like a bad aftertaste, more content than care. Yet Emma wouldn't have wanted total cutoff. Her compassion clause allowed grace, measured portions to remind without rewarding. The plan unfolded in layers, starting small to ease the sting. For each child, $7,500 wired immediately upon signing acknowledgement of the terms, no strings beyond a commitment to quarterly check-ins, real ones, not reels. It was seed money, enough for a down payment or a buffer, but tied to participation logs I'd keep simple, visits documented by date, contributions noted. Plus one legacy item, personal touches Emma had earmarked in her notes: Granddad's pocket watch for Nathan, the silver timepiece that ticked through our family stories, teardrop earrings for Kelly, the ones Emma wore on our first date, dangling like unshed tears, a field compass for Josh, brass and reliable, the tool I'd used to teach him navigation on Boy Scout trips. Tokens to point them home, Emma had written in the margins, her handwriting looping elegant even in weakness. The main pool, though, that was the heart. Redirected not to heirs chasing spotlights, but to the quiet forces that had held me up. First, the Emma Harper Nursing Scholarship Fund, $800,000 seeded for county nurses, the ones who'd manned those Chicago infusions with steady hands and kind words. Liam had partnered with the local community college, annual awards for caregivers pursuing advanced training, practical support for the frontline, the people who joked with Emma about vending coffee pairings to lift her spirits. They gave her dignity when we couldn't, I'd told him, and he nodded, drafting the endowment to grow tax-free, names of recipients shared in a yearly newsletter I'd oversee. Next, a share to Joanna, $150,000 outright, for a year of quiet care, but really a lifetime nod to the friendship that outlasted trends. She'd balked when I mentioned it earlier, waving her paint-stained hands. "Mike, I do it for Emma, not dollars." But I insisted, funds for her cottage repairs, art supplies, perhaps a studio expansion so she could teach classes on resilience through color. It was Emma's idea, whispered during one of their record sessions. "Joanna's the sister I chose, give her roots to keep blooming." Liam structured it as a grant, no repayment, just a clause for her to mentor one young artist yearly, passing the compassion forward. Then, the lifetime stipend for Mrs. Reeves, $100,000 initial, plus $2,000 monthly, indexed to inflation, enough to ease her fixed income, cover those henhouse feeds and garden tools without worry. She'd been the first to breach the walls after Emma, her thermoses a lifeline when grief choked the fridge empty. For the ones who feed the soul, Emma's notes read, and Liam wove it in seamlessly, with provisions for her heirs if she passed, ensuring the chain didn't break. Mrs. Reeves caught wind somehow, Joanna's loose lips over pie, and when I broached it later, she teared up, hugging me fierce. "Child, this is for all the widows watching. But I'll take it to keep coming back." Finally, co-funding the Lakeside Community Park, the bulk, $950,000, to develop that sold lot into Emma's garden, a green space with trails winding to the spring, benches for reflection, a pavilion for community events. The county matched half, but our seed made it real. Native plants Emma loved, a history kiosk with her teaching stories, even a small amphitheater for Joanna's jazz nights. No plaques for the absent, just one central, reading for those who nurture without notice. Liam handled the nonprofit setup, me as board chair, ensuring it served Milwaukee's edges, the neighborhoods hit hardest by floods and forgetfulness. We gathered at the table around noon, the turkey carved and plates passed, laughter mingling with the clatter. Liam waited till dessert, the pecan pie steaming as he spread the amendments, simple forms, 2 pages each, explaining the distributions without legalese overload. I signed first, pen steady, then passed to the group for witness. This is Emma's vision, refined, I said, voice carrying over the hum. Mrs. Reeves nodded, her stipend form tucked away like a recipe card. Joanna initialed hers with a flourish, already sketching park ideas on a napkin. The vets raised mugs to the fund, toasting the nurses who'd saved more than lives. The kids arrived mid-afternoon, unannounced but expected, their texts buzzing about surprise family time. Faces drawn from travel, suitcases in tow, they hugged awkwardly, eyes scanning the crowd, the unfamiliar faces. Nathan complimented the turkey, Kelly snapped a discreet photo, Josh lingered by the records. I let the meal play out, stories flowing, Hank's flood tales, Joanna's Nina anecdotes, before pulling them aside to the study. Sit, I said, Liam joining with the kids' forms. Their eyes widened at the $7,500 lines, the legacy items laid out on the desk, watch glinting, earrings catching light, compass pointing north. Mom wanted this, I explained, voice even. Small steps. Sign, and it's yours, plus the path to more, if you walk it. They hesitated, questions bubbling, about the main pool, the redirects Liam outlined neutrally. Nathan pushed, Dad, we could manage it better, invest, grow the family brand. Kelly nodded. Imagine the awareness we could raise. But the forms held firm, no challenges, or zero. They signed, hands shaking, the items claimed with murmured thanks. As they pocketed them, I felt no triumph, just release, Emma's compassion at work, measuring not punishment, but potential. The afternoon waned with park sketches on the table, the group blending, kids polite but peripheral, the real family in the stories shared. By evening, as stars pricked the sky, I knew the $2 million wasn't lost, it was planted, roots sinking where actions had already bloomed. Emma's garden would grow, watered by springs unseen, a legacy verbs built, not vanished. The night after Thanksgiving stretched long, the house settling into a hush broken only by the distant hum of the heater and the faint scratch of Joanna's records winding down. The kids had crashed in the guest rooms, their suitcases half unpacked, conversations trailing into awkward silences over coffee. Nathan fiddled with his phone, Kelly scrolled feeds, Josh stared out at the frost-kissed yard. I left them to it, retiring to Emma's old rocker in the study, the legacy items glinting on the desk like unanswered questions. Sleep came fitful, dreams of floods and springs mingling with her voice, measure the heart, Mike. Dawn crept in gray and insistent, the first light filtering through the curtains as footsteps shuffled down the hall. They gathered in the kitchen before the coffee brewed, Nathan leading, script in hand, his face set with that boardroom resolve, Kelly beside him, notes on her tablet, Josh hanging back, camera slung over his shoulder like armor. Dad, we couldn't sleep, Nathan started, voice steady but rehearsed. We've processed everything, the trust, the amendments. We get it now. Mom's vision was about real change, not just words. Kelly jumped in, eyes earnest. We're sorry. For the absences, the posts over presents. We want to make it right, a public apology video, scripted to honor her. Then, a collab, rebrand the legacy as family content. Scholarships, the park, we could amplify it all, turn Emma's story into a movement. Sponsors are interested, it could grow the fund exponentially. I poured water into the percolator, letting the steam rise like a veil, as Liam entered from the side door, summoned by my midnight text. He carried the trust binder, thick and unyielding. Morning, he said neutrally, flipping to the no contest clause. The kids straightened, pitching harder, partnerships, viral potential, how their networks could elevate the park into a destination. But Liam's voice cut clean, any pressure, legal maneuver, or attempt to alter terms wipes your take to zero. That's the trigger, challenges include collabs that monetize without consent. Emma's words, actions, not agendas. Their faces fell, the script crumpling in Nathan's fist. Protests bubbled, fairness, intentions, but the clause stood ironclad, Emma's foresight a wall they couldn't scale. I turned from the counter, cranberry punch ladled into mugs, the tart juice swirling red as old wounds. "Love's a verb, not a poster," I said, handing them each one, the steam curling between us. "It shows in the showing up, not the selling. Emma built this for builders, not brands." We drove to the park in silence, the new Emma's garden unfolding under winter's bare branches, the spring bubbling clear, trails etched in fresh gravel, benches waiting for spring's green. The plaque gleamed at the center, "For those who were here when no one was looking." The water's silence answered louder than all our words, rippling steady as the trust that held it all. They stood there, mugs cooling in gloved hands, and for the first time, I saw not performers, but possibilities, Emma's compassion, still measuring, still calling them home.